Brenda Bratschi had always been a tomboy.
Brenda could fish and hunt with the best of them.
And her new husband, Randy, was a good old boy.
Liked to deer hunt, liked to drink beer.
They appeared to be well matched.
They looked like they were perfectly happy together.
But then, after only a few months together...
911, what's the emergency?
Yes, ma'am, my husband's trying to kill me.
Or was it, as Randy claimed, the other way around?
My wife's trying to kill me.
The high-stakes game of he said, she said
Assault and battery with intent to kill.
Up to 20 years in prison.
Would lead to a mysterious disappearance.
He just fell off the face of the earth.
And when he was finally found 5 years later,
all that was left was essentially a skeleton.
Brenda would have a lot of explaining to do.
Do you know how Randy's body got under that truck?
Coward, South Carolina, July 16, 2009. It was a sweltering Thursday afternoon in this sleepy town of 750 in the South Carolina Low Country.
We're about an hour from the coast, from Myrtle Beach.
And it was definitely no day at the beach for the work crew at the old Bratschi place, tasked with moving a single-wide trailer off the 22-acre property by its new owners.
They were going to put a new house on the lot.
And that was where the workmen ran into a problem, because the trailer had been on the property for some time.
Over the years, you know, trees will grow here and there.
And because of the way it had kind of grown in around it, they had to drag the trailer a short ways before they could hook it up and actually tow it out on its wheels.
And as the workers dragged the trailer to clear the trees,
the tongue of the trailer dug into the dirt.
It plows the ground up.
And as it did, the tongue suddenly snagged on something buried beneath the trailer.
One of the assistants that was standing outside directing the truck all of a sudden saw the tarp come up.
And just seconds after the assistant noticed that the trailer had snagged the buried tarp, something rolled out of it.
He saw what he thought was a gourd.
But then, as he stepped closer,
he realized it was a skull.
The discovery would not only end 5 years of rumor and speculation about the mysterious disappearance of the trailer's previous owner, it would land his wife, 45-year-old Brenda Bratschi, in the middle of a murder investigation. Born in 1963, Brenda Miles grew up in Coward, where her father ran a gas station.
She learned to change tires and pump gas and do whatever.
Although she mostly grew up on the family farm.
She worked the family farm from the time she was very young, which is not unusual around here.
And it was on the farm that she learned to hunt and fish.
She was very outdoorsy.
Brenda could fish and hunt with the best of them, skin animals, she could cut firewood. I mean, she did it all.
She wasn't your normal go to the movies on Saturday night type of a girl. She was more of the mud bogging, deer hunting, catfish, you know, fishing type of a girl.
And by high school, Brenda had become a tough, self-reliant tomboy.
Brenda was one of the boys.
And she basically dressed like one, too.
She usually wore her hair short.
Blue jeans and a T-shirt, you know, no makeup.
Fatigues and, you know, camouflage and stuff from hunting and stuff.
She had a hard look about her.
She was a hard worker, too. After high school, Brenda skipped college and went straight to a series of tough, labor-intensive jobs.
She had worked at a hog farm, set catfish lines.
She married twice, and by the mid-'80s, she'd had 2 children.
She had a son and a daughter.
Neither marriage worked out, though, so she struggled to get by, working the same sort of jobs she'd done as a teenager.
Interior and exterior house painting, hanging drywall, just basically anything that she could do to make money.
And by 2004, the 40-year-old had also gotten a job tending bar.
We had what we used to call juke joints, little small country bars.
And the bar was where Brenda met her 3rd husband. "53-year-old Randy Bratschi wasn't from Coward, but he fit right in nonetheless.
Randy Bratschi was a good old boy, liked to deer hunt, liked to drink beer.
Originally from Tennessee, he'd been a police officer in Florida.
He retired from that and went to school to be a master electrician.
And he'd moved to Florence County around 1990 after his nearly 20-year marriage had ended in divorce.
It was a new start for him, and he was looking forward to it.
Randy had come to South Carolina to take a job in a Florence County paper mill.
He worked in the mechanical area of the plant, worked all the overtime he could get. He was extremely dependable, made very, very good money.
Money he spent on a little place out in the country just outside Coward.
It was about 22 acres. He had a single-wide mobile home that he had purchased.
The PD River was close by. He had a boat so he could fish and hunt and do all the things that he liked to do.
And his hobbies led him to build a close-knit circle of friends who shared his love of the outdoors.
We hunted together, fished together, shot pool together.
He was so likable, so personable. He had made some great friends.
He had a lot of friends. There wasn't nothing that Randy wouldn't do for them.
And by 2004, after almost 14 years in Coward, he was 53 years old and living the good old boys version of the good life.
He worked hard every day at the paper mill. And then, you know, on the weekends, Randy and his friends, they like to drink some beer.
Randy used to have a circuit that he used to run when he wasn't working. He would basically go, you know, from bar to bar.
And at one Florence County juke joint in 2004, he just happened to catch the eye of the short-haired woman behind the bar, Brenda.
She was checking Randy up, and 2 days later, they would date.
And 3 months after that,
he brought Brenda to our house and introduced her as his new wife.
I don't even think there was an engagement. Just next thing I knew, they were married.
Despite the 13-year difference in their ages, the pair appeared to be a good match.
She was active type.
She liked to go hunting.
If anything, Randy's new bride was even more of a good old boy than he was.
She was known as more, actually, of an outdoorsman than her husband actually was.
She could fight and shoot like a man.
But if Randy had found a hunting buddy, Brenda had found something else: security.
Randy made a good living, and he could provide for her, and he also was supporting her son that was living with him at the time. He was in high school.
And he didn't mind doing it either.
Randy had a very soft place in his heart for others that were financially less fortunate. He was trying to help her to live a better life.
Anything that she wanted, you know, he gave her.
Not that there appeared to be much that down-to-earth Brenda really wanted.
They didn't live a lavish lifestyle. I mean, Brenda wasn't wearing Gucci or, you know.
And while they could afford to travel,
they had been to New Orleans and several other places.
The couple mostly stuck close to home, spending their time in the woods or on the water, doing what they loved most of all.
They used to go catfishing a lot together. They went hunting together.
And since she was just one of the boys, she fit in well with Randy's friends, too.
We'd just all get together and somebody would be cooking. We'd have a good time. There'd be a fire going. Everybody just sitting around talking.
In fact, Brenda and Randy fit so well together that his friends assumed that the couple had a bright future ahead of them.
They had a good time together. They looked like they were perfectly happy together.
But after just 6 months, their marriage would take a sudden turn. The first act in what would turn out to be a 5-year mystery. On the morning of October 22nd, 2004, 40-year-old Brenda Bratschi dialed 911 from her car as she raced away from her Coward, South Carolina home.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
We have a deal with.
She said he had a hoe, a garden tool, and had tried to attack her.
According to Brenda, she had managed to fight him off with a club she kept in her car.
I got away from it. I got my vehicle.
Where's he at?
He's still at the house.
While Brenda fled, sheriff's deputies were dispatched to the house, and they were still en route when dispatch received another 911 call from Brenda's husband, 54-year-old Randy Bratschi.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
My wife's trying to kill me.
Caught in a he said, she said between the couple, the dispatcher tried to sort out the truth.
Did you hit her with a hoe? I have car struck. She beat me with that club.
And according to Randy, he was lucky to be alive.
She hit you with a club. Where are you bleeding from? From the head.
Who was telling the truth? When Brenda arrived at the Coward police station a few minutes later, it was clear that she'd been in a violent encounter.
She was covered with blood.
But how much of the blood was Brenda's? For a supposedly brutal attack, her injuries were minor.
She had a cut on her thumb.
A small laceration. That was the only trauma. She had nothing else.
And when the investigators asked her why Randy might try to kill her, she had little to say.
She said, I don't know. We were going to the bank, turned around, went back home, and the next thing I knew, he was trying to kill me.
But if that was how it happened, when sheriff's deputies arrived at the couple's trailer, it appeared that Randy's plan had backfired horribly.
Randy's injuries were pretty massive.
He had facial lacerations. He had head trauma.
The left eye socket was fractured severely.
When he was transported to a hospital in nearby Lake City, the doctors said he had been lucky.
A little bit this way or that way, that he would have been dead.
He had been beaten to within an inch of his life.
In his statement, Randy told the investigators that the whole thing had started early on the morning of the altercation, when he'd stopped off to run a few errands on his way home from working the graveyard shift at the paper mill.
He had gone to the drugstore to pick up a prescription, and his debit card was denied.
Randy said that when he checked with his credit union, not only was his checking account empty, there was a shocking discrepancy in the couple's savings account, too.
He thought he might have had, 20, 30 grand or something like that in there, and he didn't have a whole lot in there. It was less than 1,000.
Randy said he'd been furious about the missing money.
He went home and said, I need you to go to the credit union with me.
He wanted to take Brenda to straighten that out and see what she knew about it, because she would be the only other person that had access to his account.
But as they were driving to the credit union,
Brenda starts complaining of some stomach pain, says she needs to go home right away. They turn the car around and go back home.
Once back at the trailer, Randy said he'd gotten out of the car and leaned up against the fender, waiting for Brenda.
That's when she attacked Randy Bratschi.
According to Randy, Brenda had slipped out of the back door of the trailer and snuck up on him from behind.
Got hit on the head, went down on his knees, and he said it almost knocked him out.
Randy claimed that Brenda had hit him with the small wooden club he kept in his vehicle, a tire thumper.
Tire thumper is something they're used by truck drivers, just popping the tires. They can tell by the sound, if that tire is underinflated or what.
It also makes a handy weapon.
It almost looks like a miniature Louisville Slugger baseball bat.
He'd been in fights before and never been hit like that by a grown man.
Stunned by the blow, Randy said all he could do was stagger to his feet and try to escape from Brenda's vicious attack.
She was swinging wildly, is what he said. He was just taking blows from all different directions.
And as he got near the trailer,
got close enough to the tool shed or the garden shed that they had, and there was a hoe sitting beside it, and he was able to grab the hoe.
Randy said grabbing the garden tool had saved his life.
He was able to keep her back with that hoe, and then he managed to get inside and get away from her.
Randy's story was drastically different from his wife's. But when the investigators checked Randy's bank records, they found the couple's accounts had been drained by a long series of cash withdrawals.
We're not talking $25, $50, $75. We're talking $300 today, $425 tomorrow, $300 the next day.
Everything was consistent with what Randy was telling us.
And when the investigators interviewed several of the couple's friends, they revealed where the money was likely going. Brenda was gambling it away.
Come to find out, she had an addiction to video poker.
At the time in South Carolina, video poker was legal and was in every gas station and convenience store. That certainly would be an easy way to spend a lot of money quickly.
But did that mean Randy was telling the truth? Or was it possible that he'd attacked Brenda in a rage about the missing money? The investigators didn't think so, based on his initial 911 call.
My wife's trying to kill me.
You could hear the fear in his voice.
Her story just didn't hold up.
So at the end of the day, the Florence County Sheriff's Department took Brenda into custody.
Brenda turned herself in.
Charged with assault and battery with intent to kill, Brenda spent the next few days in jail.
It was a family member that posted her bond and got her out.
Randy certainly didn't pay it. In fact, he'd gone to the courthouse and gotten an order of protection against her.
A restraining order saying Brenda couldn't be around him.
And if she was convicted of the assault charges, chances were she wouldn't be around him for a long time.
Assault and battery with intent to kill, carried at the time up to 20 years in prison.
Once out of jail, Brenda moved in with family.
She went to stay with her sister and her brother-in-law, who had a large farm there in Coward.
Meanwhile, Randy continued to live in the couple's trailer and started taking steps to end his brief marriage to Brenda.
He had contacted an attorney and that he was going to go forward with a divorce.
Randy was moving on and life was good.
But how far would he go? On November 27th, a month after the assault, the chief investigator got another phone call, but not from Randy.
I got a call from Randy's best friend, and he said he was concerned about Randy because they couldn't find him.
I went twice, knocked on the door, nobody come to the door.
The investigators couldn't reach him either.
I called him a couple times, never got an answer back. Went down to the house on Sunday. Didn't appear to be anyone home.
Randy also failed to show up for work at the paper mill.
He was not the kind of guy who would just blow off going to work, at least not without calling, saying, hey, I'm sick or something happened.
Given his violent encounter with Brenda just a month earlier, some of his friends immediately feared the worst.
Randy, he would tell us, no, she meant to kill me, and I'm scared to death. She's gonna do it.
He had seen her field dress a deer. He knew what she was capable of.
In fact, Randy had been so afraid of Brenda that it offered his family one faint glimmer of hope about his disappearance.
Maybe he just jumped on a plane and left.
But then, a few days after he disappeared,
Randy's rodeo was found at Bluffs Landing, which is a boat landing where people put in and out of the river.
However, there was no sign of Randy.
It basically looked like somebody had driven the car there, stopped, put it in park, and walked away.
By 2009, it had been 5 years since Brenda Bratschi had been charged with assaulting her husband outside their Coward, South Carolina home in October of 2004.
She attacked Randy with a wooden tire thumper that the truck drivers used to test their tires.
She was looking at doing 15 or 20 years on assault and battery with intent to kill.
But the case had never gone to trial. A month after her arrest, while she was out on bail, Randy had disappeared.
It's kind of like he just fell off the face of the earth.
His vehicle was later discovered at the PD River at DeWitt's Bluff Landing.
There had been no sign of Randy, despite an exhaustive search.
We did a large-scale search with divers on the river in both directions.
The authorities also searched Randy's trailer, top to bottom.
It was a single-wide trailer that had metal underpinning around it. We peeled the underpinning back and looked with flashlights, didn't see anything.
And the entire community helped search the rest of Randy's 22 acres.
There was times it'd be over 100 people.
The sheriff's office helped organize these people to go inch by inch over acres of property.
The investigators even brought in cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar.
We didn't find any evidence of any human remains.
And by the end of 2005, after a year of fruitless searches, the case had grown cold.
There was the possibility that Randy was never going to be found.
Naturally, nearly everyone assumed that Brenda was behind her estranged husband's disappearance.
From the start, there was strong suspicion that Brenda had murdered Randy.
Naturally, we asked Brenda and her son to come in and talk to us about about when was the last time they saw Randy, what was he doing, who he was with.
But neither had claimed to know anything about Randy's disappearance. In fact, Brenda's son had been camping on the river with friends when Randy went missing.
Her story to me then was that her son was the one that had called her and told her, "Mama, I don't know where Randy is. He was supposed to let me borrow the boat."
Still, the fact that Brenda had been facing prosecution for her previous assault on Randy made her a prime suspect.
20 years in prison could be plenty of motive for anyone to try to get rid of the main witness in the case.
Because Randy wasn't there to testify, then we couldn't take that case to trial.
But suspecting Brenda of murder was one thing. Prosecuting her for it was another.
The prosecutor wanted to find Randy before they prosecuted.
Finding the answers, finding him, being able to link Brenda to the crime, I think that was hugely frustrating to the sheriff's office.
And by 2009, it looked as if Brenda hadn't just gotten away with assault. To some, it looked as if she'd gotten away with murder, too. Despite the fact that most folks around Coward suspected she'd killed Randy, Brenda remained in the area.
She did work at the family farm.
She was working at a bar, and there was a body shop too.
One thing she never did, though, was move back into the trailer where she'd lived with Randy.
There would have been nothing preventing her from going back to the marital home and moving in.
And her decision surprised some people.
The house was paid for.
But she just chose to never go back and let it go to tax sale.
And by July of 2009, nearly 5 years after Randy's disappearance, the trailer and the 22 acres had passed through several hands to a new owner who wanted to build a house on the property.
They hired a mobile home moving company to move the single-wide trailer off of the property and down the street.
And on July 16th, as the movers dragged the trailer off the site,
the tongue fell down and grabbed right up underneath the edge of the tarp that Randy was wrapped in.
At least the workers suspected that the remains they uncovered were Randy's.
Given the history and what had happened on that property.
And they immediately contacted the Florence County Sheriff's Office.
I thought they were playing a joke on me. It had been so many years, and it had been something that, I was beginning to wonder, are we ever going to find him?
But when deputies drove out to the trailer, they quickly confirmed that the movers had unearthed the remains of an adult male.
It was a shallow grave. It was a couple feet deep.
But why hadn't the body been found during the extensive searches of the property 5 years earlier?
That is something I cannot explain. I personally looked under the house myself on one of the searches that we did looking for Randy Bratschi. I think he was buried far enough, I guess with the tarp and the soil on top of him was enough to keep the odor in the ground.
For Randy's family, the discovery offered a long-awaited shot at justice.
I knew in my heart that she had killed him, and I was gonna make sure that she paid for this.
But first, the authorities would have to prove the body was Randy's, which was no easy task.
There was such a level of decomposition that it made even identifying the remains almost an impossible task.
All that was left was essentially a skeleton.
It wasn't until almost 5 months later that the forensic experts were able to confirm that the remains were Randy's. And in a bizarre twist, the original assault with the tire thumper turned out to be the key to making the identification.
They took the CAT scans and MRIs that the doctors had done, and they compared those with the remains, and they were able to identify him that way.
Once the body was identified, the investigators were able to get a warrant for Brenda's arrest on murder charges.
Nobody would have cause to do it, other than the person that attempted to kill him a month prior.
The investigators also got the judge to swear out a warrant for Brenda's 23-year-old son.
Investigators had always thought that Brenda's son had not necessarily helped her carry out the murder, but might have known something about it.
There were major inconsistencies that he told us in his statements.
Brenda was picked up first on the morning of December 7th, 2009.
Brenda's taken into the sheriff's office. They sit her down in a room, and they asked if she'd take a polygraph, and she said she would.
Once she'd been hooked up to the machine, the investigators started asking questions.
Do you know how Randy's body got under that truck?
She was claiming complete innocence. Nothing to do with his disappearance, nothing to do with his murder.
But by the time the test was over, Brenda sounded more than a little unsure of her performance.
I mean, I just don't trust these things. I never have.
And then, after making that attempt to discredit the results,
I feel like I failed.
Yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. Get on the back.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know why you failed? Because you didn't tell the truth.
They used that as a jumping off point to try to elicit a confession.
Brenda refused to take the bait.
I told you this. I told you.
But the investigators had another card to play, her 23-year-old son.
They got deputies going to arrest your son. They're going to charge you. They're going to charge you with murder. You need to tell us. Stop.
The threat appeared to work. Brenda asked for a break and a chance to talk to investigator Phil Hanna instead.
I was born and raised in the area. People knew me. I was trusted in that area.
I'm going to talk to you.
Okay, I'll go get it. You want to talk to Bill by yourself? Or you want me in here?
Well, first off, I want another cigarette before I talk to you. I want Phil to go outside with you.
Okay.
She wanted to smoke a cigarette. And she and I walked outside by ourselves in the front of the Florence County Sheriff's Office.
Phil had a voice recorder in his pocket so that he would record anything that he and Brenda talked about.
Brenda didn't know about the recorder, but she knew that she was talking to a cop, and that didn't stop her.
While she smoked her cigarette is when she told me everything that happened.
Brenda started by claiming her son was innocent.
He doesn't know nothing about this.
And she said she knew her son wasn't involved because she had killed Randy.
And I knew they wouldn't believe it would be self-defense. I did the only thing I knew to do, Bill.
She finally confessed.
I felt like she was glad to be able to finally tell somebody.
And once Brenda had finished her cigarette, she went back inside, sat down in front of the camera, and told the investigators just how Randy died. Her version of it, at least.
Tell me again what you told me a while ago.
According to Brenda, it started with a chance encounter on November 26, 2004, a month after her arrest for assault.
I passed him on the road that morning and he flagged me down and I stopped. And he wanted to talk. He asked me if I'd drive back up to the house with him.
Brenda said she'd agreed, but she was reluctant to go inside the trailer with her estranged husband.
He reached over and kissed me on the cheek. Told me he wanted us to work things out. He said, I know we can do it. And I said, Randy, I said, I'll have to think about it. I said, I'm not even supposed to be up. I said, that's easy. I said, I can go back to bed.
Brenda said even as Randy was reassuring her that everything would be fine, he was reaching for something else.
He reached in his bag. Nothing but a kiss.
She explained that she felt like he was going to shoot her.
Told her that that he was going to take care of her once and for all.
He just got one of the craziest looks of his eyes.
She struggled with him face to face.
And we were fighting over the gun and we fell in each other and she killed him.
Brenda said that when she realized Randy was dead, she had panicked.
She said that the sheriff's office didn't believe her during the assault case and that there was no way that we were going to believe that things happened the way that it actually did.
I panicked for a little while, and I didn't know what to do. So I pulled the pin from up under the trailer and opened up under the trailer.
Okay. And you put the tarp on top of it. Did you put any dirt on top of the tarp?
I dug it out with my hands and
piled it up on top of the tarp.
Yes, sir.
Okay. After you did that, what did you do then?
I got in the car and I left.
Then, according to what Brenda told the investigators, she'd left Randy's car at the boat landing.
Brenda's plan was to stage a suicide. You know, he jumped in the river and drowned.
And while she was there,
she threw the gun into the river.
By the time she was done, the investigators figured they had almost everything they needed.
She does admit that she killed him, and she admits to getting rid of his body.
Even if Brenda insisted it wasn't murder.
It was still her contention that it was self-defense. Randy attacked her. She was just defending herself.
On April 16, 2012, Brenda Bratschi went on trial for murder at the Florence County Courthouse in Florence, South Carolina. The 48-year-old was charged with the murder of her husband, Randy.
Randy disappeared. Brenda was a very logical suspect. 4 weeks before, she'd tried to kill him.
That assault in October of 2004 had resulted in Brenda's arrest.
Brenda was arrested for assault and battery with intent to kill.
But that case had been put on hold when Randy disappeared a month later.
I was thoroughly convinced that she had done something to Randy.
Although it wasn't until 2009, after Randy's skeletal remains had been found underneath the couple's trailer, that she had been charged with murder.
Property was sold, so they were removing Randy's old trailer.
When they dropped the trailer and pulled it, the tongue actually caught a piece of the blue tarp that Randy was wrapped up in and pulled him up out of the sand and the dirt.
After her arrest for murder, she had confessed to killing Randy, although Brenda claimed that she had acted in self-defense.
He pointed the gun at me, and I grabbed his arm, and we got to fighting over the gun, and it went off.
And when she walked into the courtroom on the morning of April 16th, she appeared confident about her chances of acquittal.
She'd made the comments that, y'all are only going to see me for a couple more days because I'm going home.
Brenda's cockiness had nothing to do with her claims of self-defense, though. Instead, it had to do with a ruling the judge made before the trial began.
The court was not going to allow her confession to be used as evidence against her.
The judge felt that maybe Brenda Bratschi was somehow coerced because her son was also arrested.
They've got deputies going to arrest your son. They're going to charge him. They're going to charge him with murder.
That it probably put undue influence and too much pressure on her.
And the result was a huge hole in the prosecution's case.
We couldn't go into anything regarding the actual murder and how that happened.
What the prosecution did have, though, was what had happened a month before Randy disappeared, when Brenda had allegedly beaten him so severely with a wooden club that he ended up in the hospital.
Normally in court, you can't talk about what a defendant's done in their past or their prior bad acts or crimes. The court made an exception for us in this case.
So with the judge's blessing, the prosecutor opened his case by walking the jury through the chain of events that had begun when Randy discovered the money missing from their bank accounts, money that Brenda had lost playing video poker.
Brenda was like a trapped animal. She knew she was going to be in trouble.
Therefore, to keep Randy from going to the authorities about the missing money.
She lashed out and attacked Randy and tried to kill him.
And when she failed,
she had this serious felony that was pending against her.
A conviction would mean as much as 20 years in prison. But according to the prosecution, there was a way out. Get rid of Randy.
If she removed the victim from the equation, she didn't have to worry about being prosecuted.
Because he was the only eyewitness other than her.
So according to the prosecution's theory, on November 26th,
she came back and finally finished the job.
He leaves the paper mill at 7 o'clock in the morning, gets home, And as he walked in the door, Brenda was waiting on him. That is the theory, that she ambushed him.
Friends of Randy's also took the stand and described how afraid he'd been after the initial assault when Brenda was released on bail.
He was scared to death of her. He was frightened, so frightened that there was a restraining order for her. She could not be nowhere near that property.
However, while they had plenty of evidence that connected Brenda to the assault,
the state had nothing to really tie Brenda to the murder.
Nothing except for Randy's vehicle. After Randy disappeared, someone had abandoned his SUV at a boat landing on the PD River as if to make it look like he'd drowned.
The night that it was left, there was a person that approached a couple of houses adjacent to the landing and asked to use the telephone.
And a resident from one of those homes took the stand and described the person who'd knocked on his door that night as a woman dressed in hunting camouflage.
He said, this woman, she acted scared, acted disoriented.
According to his testimony, the woman claimed she'd had car trouble and he'd offered to drive her into Coward.
He gave her a ride to back within about a block of where Randy's trailer stood.
And when the prosecutor asked if the person that knocked on his door was in the courtroom, the witness answered yes. And then he pointed at Brenda.
It was strong circumstantial evidence because this happened the night after Randy was missing.
But why had Brenda made such a colossal error? According to the prosecution's theory, Brenda had most likely intended to call a family member and arrange a ride. But once she'd reached the riverbank, that plan had failed.
What she didn't count on was the cell service at the landing was non-existent.
Would connecting Brenda to Randy's car be enough to convict her of murder? When it was the defense's turn, Brenda's attorney opened his case by putting her son, now 25, on the witness stand.
We had no intention of calling her son to the stand, so I was a little surprised when they called him.
Back in 2009, after Randy's body had been found, Brenda's then 23-year-old son had been arrested along with his mother. But contrary to what the investigators had told Brenda in the interrogation room, he'd never been charged with his stepfather's murder.
Brenda's son had a rock-solid alibi for the time that Randy had actually disappeared.
He was actually camping with some friends of his.
However, he had been arrested on minor charges.
There were some discrepancies in his statement that he gave.
We charged the son with misprision of a felony,
which is a common law offense and doesn't carry near the repercussions that a murder charge would carry.
However, facing those charges had a serious impact on his testimony.
Every question he was asked, he claimed the Fifth Amendment,
which the prosecutors figured was precisely why the defense had put Brenda's son on the stand in the first place, to suggest the possibility that maybe instead of his mother, he had killed Randy.
They were trying to take the blame off of Brenda, cast some shadow of doubt.
But when the case went to the jury, it quickly became clear that the defense was having second thoughts about their chances for an acquittal. While deliberations were ongoing, the defense approached the prosecutors with the offer of a last-minute deal.
She would plead guilty for 25 years.
On April 19, 2012, 48-year-old Brenda Bratschi sat in a Florence, South Carolina courtroom awaiting the verdict in her murder trial.
Brenda acted as if there was not a care in the world.
She was accused of killing her estranged husband, Randy, in 2004.
It was such a heinous crime. It was so violent, so vile, that a person like that doesn't need to be in society.
Randy's sister was determined to see to it, too. She had already rejected the defense's offer to plead guilty in exchange for a 25-year sentence.
She had faith in the justice system. She'd let the jury handle it.
And the family's 8-year quest for justice all came down to the moment when the verdict was read.
Brenda was found guilty of murder.
Brenda appeared crushed by the verdict.
The minute they said guilty, she put her face down and looked straight down and didn't look back up.
Worse was coming, though. When the judge handed down his sentence, Randy's sister got her wish.
The judge told her that she will spend the rest of her natural life in prison.
She was given life without the possibility of parole.
And it was only after he'd passed sentence that the judge revealed the evidence he'd previously ruled inadmissible to the court.
That, yeah, she confessed. She admitted that she did it.
Which came as a huge shock to Brenda's family, who had no idea that she'd confessed.
I really felt sorry for her family.
Everybody was in tears about the outcome, Her family were all gathered up and hugging one another and crying.
Among Randy's family and friends, there was no rejoicing, just a long-awaited feeling of closure.
After all that time, all those years, it was finally over.
There was also a sense of relief that Brenda was indeed going to prison for a crime she very nearly got away with.
If that trailer had never been moved, he wouldn't be found today.
See that? That was amazing. I love this.
Brenda Bratschi had always been a tomboy. Brenda could fish and hunt with the best of them. From her earliest memories, a deep affinity for the untamed expanses of the outdoors had defined her character, shaping not only her recreational pursuits, but also her very outlook on life. This was not a whimsical affectation or a passing phase, but rather a fundamental, immutable aspect of her identity, one forged through practical experience and an innate preference for the visceral authenticity of the natural world over the more prescribed conventions of societal expectation. Her proficiency in the challenging arts of angling and hunting was not merely competent, but genuinely exceptional, allowing her to stand shoulder to shoulder and often surpass the most seasoned outdoorsmen in her community. She possessed an intuitive understanding of the wild, a robust resilience, and an unflinching practicality that rendered her a formidable presence in any environment demanding grit and skill. And her new husband, Randy Bratschi, a man who had traversed his own distinct life's path before their convergence, was, by all accounts and appearances, a good old boy. This particular moniker, steeped in the cultural vernacular of the American South, suggested a specific set of values, a lifestyle steeped in tradition, camaraderie, and a straightforward appreciation for uncomplicated pleasures. Randy, too, found immense satisfaction in the pursuit of game, particularly deer hunting, an activity that offered both sport and sustenance, embodying a connection to ancestral rhythms. Complementing this outdoor passion was his equally well-known enjoyment of drinking beer, a ritual often performed in convivial company of friends, fostering bonds and lightening the burdens of daily life. In their initial phases as a married couple, viewed through the lens of external observation, they appear to be well matched. Their shared enthusiasm for the rugged beauty of the wilderness, their mutual comfort in informal, earthy settings, and their apparent satisfaction with the simple, agrarian rhythms of life suggested a profound and natural synchronicity. The early days of their marital bond offered a comforting picture of domestic harmony, an image of two souls, perhaps even two complementary spirits, who had serendipitously found their perfect counterpart in one another. To all who knew them, or indeed merely observed them in passing, they looked like they were perfectly happy together, projecting an aura of contentment and a future seemingly replete with shared adventures and tranquil companionship. This superficial concord, however, masked an underlying current of complexity and fragility that would, with astonishing rapidity, betray its deceptively placid facade. But then, after only a few months together, a remarkably brief span for the foundations of the marriage to fully solidify, or was it, as Randy claimed, the other way around? The exact timeline, the precipitating events, and the ultimate causality became entangled in a bitter, profoundly unsettling conflict of narratives, forming the high-stakes game of he said, she said. This was not a trivial marital spat or a minor misunderstanding, but rather a profound rupture, escalating swiftly into allegations of severe violence. Brenda found herself accused of a most serious transgression. I saw a battery with intent to kill. In the legal lexicon, this charge signified not merely an act of physical violence, but a calculated malevolence, an attack premeditated or executed with the clear and unambiguous aim of extinguishing a life. Such an accusation, if proven in a court of law, carried with the dire prospect of a lengthy custodial sentence, up to 20 years in prison, a duration capable of irrevocably altering the trajectory of an entire human existence. This grave accusation, with its attendant legal proceedings and the raw emotional trauma it unearthed, would tragically and paradoxically lead to a mysterious disappearance. The man at the center of the dispute, Randy, vanished with suddenness that defied logic and conventional explanation. He just fell off the face of the earth, as the poignant colloquialism starkly illustrated, leaving behind an echoing void of unanswered questions and profound concern. His absence was absolute, his whereabouts completely unknown, despite increasingly desperate efforts to locate him. And when he was finally found 5 years later, a grim and protracted vigil for answers reaching its agonizing conclusion, all that was left was essentially a skeleton. The profound erosion of time, nature, and the elements had rendered him into a mere shadow of his former self, a stark and somber testament to a life brutally cut short. The macabre discovery, chilling in its starkness, would inevitably cast a long and accusatory shadow over Brenda, the only remaining party to the initial conflict. Brenda would have a lot of explaining to do, a vast and intricate narrative of events, choices, and consequences that she would be compelled to recount, not only to law enforcement and the courts, but perhaps even more pressingly to the wider community haunted by Randy's enigmatic fate. The burden of proof, the weight of suspicion, and the complex task of reconciling her past actions with the present horror would fall squarely upon her. The narrative of this perplexing and ultimately tragic saga began in the heart of Howard, South Carolina, a small, unassuming town nestled within the low country of the state. It was July 16th, 2009, a date that would indelibly mark itself upon the community's collective memory. The air that Thursday afternoon was thick and oppressive, characteristic of the region's notorious summer climate. A sweltering Thursday afternoon, it was, with humidity clinging to every surface and the sun beating down with an unyielding intensity, baking the sleepy town of 750 souls. Howard, a community characterized by its quiet rhythms and close-knit fabric, existed at a pace distinct from the bustling urban centers, a testament to a way of life deeply connected to the land. Its geographical position, about an hour from the glistening coast of Myrtle Beach, only emphasized its rural isolation, offering a stark contrast to the lively tourist destinations. And indeed, on this particular day, it was definitely no day at the beach for the work crew toiling under the relentless sun. This crew, comprising individuals with a specific mandate, had been dispatched to what was then known as the Old Bratschi place. Their arduous task was to move a single wide trailer, an aging mobile home that had served as a dwelling for Randy and Brenda, off the expansive 22-acre property. The urgency of their work stemmed from the aspirations of the property's new owners, who envisioned a fresh beginning on the land. They were going to put a new house on the lot, a modern structure designed to replace the dilapidated mobile home and herald a new chapter for the scenic acreage. And that was where the workmen ran into a problem. a practical but seemingly innocuous obstacle that would unexpectedly unravel a 5-year mystery. The issue was intrinsically linked to the trailer's long-term residency. It had been on the property for some time, its metal underbelly having settled deeply into the loamy soil over the years, becoming virtually one with the terrain. Over the years, trees grow in there because of the way it kind of grunted around it. The natural progression of vegetation, the slow but persistent encroachment of roots and branches, had created a secure, almost immovable anchor for the structure. To facilitate its removal, the crew first had to drag the trailer a short ways before they could hook it up and actually tow it. Out on its wheels, this initial dragging, an act of sheer force and determined labor, was intended to dislodge it from its verdant embrace. As the workers dragged the trailer to clear the trees, their equipment, specifically the tongue of the trailer, designed for hitching, began to function as an impromptu plow. The tongue of the trailer dug into the dirt that plows the ground up, disrupting the soil in its path. And as it did, the tongue suddenly snagged on something buried beneath the trailer. The obstruction was not the resilient root of an ancient tree or a buried stone, but something altogether different, something yielding yet stubbornly entangled. One of the assistants that was standing outside directing the truck, his gaze fixed on precise maneuvers required, all of a sudden saw the tarp come up, the unassuming piece of protective covering, pulled from its hidden resting place by the trailer's persistent movement, revealed a horrifying secret. Just seconds after the assistant noticed that the trailer had snagged the buried tarp, an object, dislodged by the sudden upheaval, rolled out of it. He saw what he thought was a gourd, a roundish, organic shape that, for a fleeting moment, could be mistaken for a discarded natural curiosity or a piece of ornamental vegetation. But then as he stepped closer, his initial confusion gave way to a sickening realization. The object was not a botanical curiosity, but a relic of humanity's most fundamental structure, chillingly devoid of flesh. He realized it was a skull. The unearthing of this macabre artifact sent a wave of icy dread through the work crew, instantly transforming a routine task into something profoundly sinister. The discovery would not only end 5 years of rumor and speculation about the mysterious disappearance of the trailer's previous owner, the long-absent Brenda Bratschi, but would also, with unsparing swiftness, land his wife, 45-year-old Brenda Bratschi, squarely in the middle of a murder investigation. The long-held suspicions, whispered conjectures, and unresolved questions that had haunted the community for half a decade would suddenly crystallize into concrete, albeit ghastly, evidence. For Brenda, the path ahead was now one fraught with interrogation, legal scrutiny, and the potential for a complete and devastating unraveling of her life. Brenda Miles, born in the year 1963, spent her formative years and subsequent adult life rooted in the familiar soil of Coward, the small South Carolina town that formed the crucible of her existence. Her childhood was shaped by the pragmatic realities of a working-class family, where diligence and self-reliance were not just virtues but necessities. Her father, a man of industry and practicality, operated a local gas station, a hub of activity in the community, and a place where Brenda absorbed early lessons in resourcefulness. There, she learned to change tires and pump gas and do whatever needed to be done, acquiring hands-on mechanical skills that defied traditional gender roles and foreshadowed her future adaptability. Although she mostly grew up on the family farm, which offered a distinct and rigorous educational experience of its own, Brenda's life was firmly tethered to agricultural labor. She worked the family farm from the time she was very young, a common and accepted practice in this rural milieu, where the younger generation was expected to contribute meaningfully to the household's sustenance and prosperity. This early immersion in farming life instilled in her a profound work ethic and a rugged self-sufficiency. And it was on the farm, amidst the daily rhythms of cultivating land and tending to livestock, that she learned to hunt and fish. These skills, more than mere hobbies, were survivalist talents, deeply practical and fundamentally ingrained into her identity. She was very outdoorsy, a descriptor that only begins to scratch the surface of her deep connection to and competence within the natural world. Brenda could fish and hunt with the best of them, effortlessly navigating the complexities of bait and tackle, and demonstrating an almost primal instinct for tracking and harvesting game. Her abilities extended beyond the act of pursuit. She was skilled at tasks often considered grim or challenging, able to skin animals with a practiced efficiency that spoke of long experience and a pragmatic disposition. She could cut firewood, not just a few logs for a casual campfire, but sufficient quantities for practical use. An arduous physical task demanding stamina and strength. I mean, she did it up, a testament to her thoroughness and determination. Her recreational pursuits, too, starkly differentiated her from her peers. She wasn't your normal go-to-the-movies on Saturday night type of a girl, one for the typical social rituals of adolescence. She was more the mudbog and deer hunting, catfish, fishing type of a girl, gravitating towards the unrefined, the physically demanding, and the truly authentic expressions of rural recreation. By the time she reached high school, Brenda's unique trajectory had coalesced into a firm identity of a tough, self-reliant tomboy. She was, in many social circles, simply considered one of the boys, her personality and interests aligning more closely with the masculine youth around her than with the expectations often placed upon young women, and she basically dressed like one too, her sartorial choices reflecting her functional and pragmatic approach to life. She usually wore her hair short, a practical cut that required minimal fuss, paired with the ubiquitous blue jeans and a t-shirt, devoid of the adornments or stylistic concerns that often characterize feminine attire. No makeup, further emphasizing her rejection of conventional presentation. For her outdoor excursions, fatigues and camouflage became her uniform, garments chosen for the utility in hunting and other rugged activities. She had a hard look about her, a visual manifestation of her tough exterior and the no-nonsense attitude forged by her upbringing. This hard look was not merely aesthetic, but a reflection of her inner fortitude. She was a hard worker, too, a reputation she earned and maintained through consistent effort and an unwavering dedication to any task set before her. Following her graduation from high school, Brenda, eschewing the path of higher education, made a deliberate choice to enter the workforce directly. She skipped college and went straight to a series of tough, labor-intensive jobs, choosing roles that demanded physical prowess and resilience over intellectual pursuits, aligning with her practical nature. Her employment history was a testament to her willingness to tackle any demanding task. She had worked at a hog farm, an environment notoriously challenging and requiring immense physical and mental fortitude. Beyond this, she had set catfish lines, a traditional method of fishing that required expertise, patience, and the ability to handle the elements. Her personal life, too, had seen its share of upheavals. She married twice, both unions eventually dissolving, leaving her to navigate the complexities of life as a single parent. And by the mid-'80s, she'd had 2 children, a son and a daughter, who became central to her world. Neither marriage worked out, though, leaving Brenda to face the financial and emotional challenges of supporting her family independently. Consequently, she struggled to get by, often working the same sort of job she'd done as a teenager, reverting to the manual labor and hands-on skills she had honed since youth. Her employment history encompassed a diverse array of physically demanding occupations: interior and exterior house painting, a trade requiring precision, stamina, and an eye for detail; hanging drywall, a taxing construction task; and just basically anything that she could do to make money. Her resourcefulness and sheer determination to provide for her children were evident in the breadth of her occupational endeavors, showcasing an adaptability born of necessity. By 2004, The specific year that would set into motion the tragic events of this narrative, Brenda, then a 40-year-old woman, had also secured a new occupation that provided her a different kind of income and social. Engagement, tending bar, in the specific cultural context of rural South Carolina at the time. These establishments were often known as what we used to call juke joints, a descriptor that conjured images of small, unpretentious country bars. These were places of local gathering, music, and simple socializing, often serving as community anchors in their own right, and a bartender here needed to possess a unique blend of toughness and convivial charm. It was within the unassuming confines of such a bar that Brenda met her third husband, the man who would irrevocably alter the course of her life. 53-year-old Brenda Bratschi, the aforementioned good old boy, was not originally from Coward, the quiet hamlet Brenda called home. Yet, despite his outsider status, his personality and predilections allowed him to fit right in nonetheless. Brenda Bratschi was, as previously characterized, a good old boy, a man whose leisure activities centered around familiar Southern pastimes. He liked to deer hunt, an activity deeply interwoven with the regional culture and economy, and he liked to drink beer, often in the company of friends, solidifying his place within the local social fabric. Originally from Tennessee, a state also rich in similar cultural traditions, Randy's professional life had been one of diverse experience and distinguished service. He'd been a police officer in Florida, a demanding career path that implied a commitment to public service and adherence to rules, and likely a practical, no-nonsense demeanor. Following his tenure in law enforcement, he retired from that, moving into a second career characterized by specialized skill. He went to school to be a master electrician, a trade requiring intricate knowledge, precise execution, and a high degree of technical aptitude. This transition suggested a man capable of reinvention, always seeking new challenges or avenues for stable employment. He'd moved to Florence County, South Carolina, around 1990. Following a significant personal transition, his nearly 20-year marriage had ended in divorce, a common but nonetheless emotionally disruptive life event. His relocation to South Carolina, therefore, represented a new start for him, and he was looking forward to it, envisioning a fresh chapter, free from past entanglements and open to new opportunities. Randy had specifically come to South Carolina to take a job in a Florence County paper mill. This was a substantial industrial facility, a cornerstone of local employment, and working there signified stable, well-paying labor. He was employed in the mechanical area of the plant, a critical role requiring specialized skills to maintain the complex machinery, ensuring the mill's continuous operation. He was an exceptionally diligent worker, always eager to maximize his earnings. He worked all the overtime he could get. This industriousness cemented his reputation as extremely dependable and demonstrated his capacity to earn very, very good money. His financial stability allowed him to acquire a comfortable life, one that resonated with his good old boy sensibilities. He spent his hard-earned money on a little place out in the country, just outside Coward, an idyllic setting that afforded privacy and ample space for his favorite pastimes. This property was substantial, comprising about 22 acres, providing a buffer from the close confines of town and room for outdoor activities. On this acreage, he had a single-wide mobile home that he had purchased, a modest but perfectly functional dwelling that suited his unpretentious lifestyle. The Petey River was close by, a vital geographical feature that opened up a world of possibilities for recreation. He had a boat, so he could fish and hunt and do all the things he liked to do, truly embodying the essence of a life lived close to nature, beyond his solitary pursuits. Randy's hobbies actively led him to build a close-knit circle of friends who shared his love of the outdoors. These were not casual acquaintances, but individuals bound by shared experiences and a mutual appreciation for specific recreational activities. We hunted together, they fished together, They even shot pool together, indicative of a well-rounded social life centered on shared passions. He was so likable, so personable, attributes that facilitated the formation of strong bonds and deep loyalties. Indeed, he had made some great friends. He had a lot of friends who cherished his company and recognized his intrinsic good nature. There wasn't nothing that Randy wouldn't do for them, a testament to his generosity and loyalty, solidifying his standing within his social circle. By 2004, the year Brenda stepped behind the bar of the juke joint, Randy's life in Coward had assumed a comfortable, predictable rhythm. After almost 14 years in Coward, he was 53 years old and, by all accounts, living the good old boys' versions of the good life. His weekdays were characterized by diligence and hard work. He worked hard every day at the paper mill. The weekends, however, were dedicated to recreation and companionship. And then, on the weekends, Randy and his friends, they liked to drink some beer. Randy, in fact, had a regular social itinerary, a pattern of visits to local establishments. Randy used to have a circuit that he used to run when he wasn't working. He would basically go, from bar to bar, a sociable progression through the local juke joints, seeking out camaraderie and light-hearted diversion. It was at one specific Florence County juke joint in 2004, during one of these established rounds, that he just happened to catch the eye of the short-haired woman behind the bar, Brenda. Her distinctive appearance and no-nonsense demeanor likely stood out. Intriguingly, it was not Randy who initiated the overture, but Brenda herself who expressed an initial interest. She was checking Randy out. The mutual spark, however, was ignited, swiftly blossomed. A mere 2 days later, they would date, a rapid progression that bespoke a powerful initial connection. And 3 months after that, with remarkable speed, he brought Brenda to our house and introduced her as his new wife. The conventional rites of engagement were evidently bypassed. A swift and decisive commitment made between them. I don't even think there was engagement. Just next thing I knew, they were married, a testament to the unexpected velocity of their romance. Despite the 13-year difference in their ages, a disparity that might, in other contexts, suggest potential challenges, the pair appeared to be a good match. Their individual profiles indicated a surprising compatibility, rooted in shared values and activities. She was an active type, possessing a vibrant, hands-on engagement with the world around her, far from a sedentary partner. Critically, she liked to go hunting, a passion that Randy undoubtedly cherished and shared. In a somewhat humorous inversion of expectations, Randy's new bride was, if anything, even more of a good old boy than he was. This playful observation, often voiced by those who knew them, highlighted Brenda's unparalleled dedication to and skill in the rugged outdoor pursuits typically associated with masculinity. She was known as more actually of an outdoorsman than her husband actually was, a reputation that underscored her formidable abilities. She could fight and shoot like a man, further reinforcing her image as someone who transcended conventional feminine roles, displaying strength and proficiency often attributed to male counterparts. Yet, if Randy had primarily found a hunting buddy, a kindred spirit with whom to share his most beloved pastimes, Brenda had, through her union with Randy, found something else of profound personal significance: security. Randy, with his steady employment and diligent work ethic, made a good living, providing a financial bedrock that Brenda, having navigated single parenthood and demanding manual labor for years, likely craved. And critically, he could provide for her. Beyond merely supporting Brenda, his generosity extended to her immediate family. He also was supporting her son that was living with him at the time, her son who was then in high school. This act of paternal provision, taking on the financial responsibility for her adolescent child, spoke volumes about Randy's benevolent character, and he didn't mind doing it either, indicating a genuine willingness and a compassionate heart. Randy, it was widely observed, had a very soft place in his heart for others that were financially less fortunate, a trait that underscored his empathetic nature. He was trying to help her to live a better life, not just materially, but in fostering a sense of stability. Anything that she wanted, he gave her, suggesting a relationship where Randy was exceedingly generous and accommodating of Brenda's desires, whatever they might be. Not that there appeared to be much that down-to-earth Brenda really wanted, at least not in the sense of lavish material possessions or ostentatious displays of wealth. They didn't live a lavish lifestyle, a testament to their mutual preference for practicality and simplicity over extravagance. I mean, Brenda wasn't wearing Gucci or, the expensive trappings of high fashion, emphasizing her indifference to status symbols, while their combined financial standing afforded them the means to travel, a luxury many aspire to. And indeed, they had been to New Orleans and several other places, indicating a degree of exploration. Their core preference remained tethered to their roots. The couple mostly stuck close to home, finding their greatest contentment and enjoyment in their local environment, spending their time in the woods or on the water, doing what they loved most of all. These pursuits, steeped in the rhythms of nature, were their ultimate solace and shared joy. They used to go catfishing a lot together, spending countless hours in companionable silence or easy conversation, patiently waiting for the catch. They went hunting together, participating in the age-old ritual that bonded them to the land and to each other. And because she was just one of the boys, seamlessly blending into traditionally male-dominated social groups. She fit in well with Randy's friends, too, an essential ingredient for a harmonious partnership. Their social gatherings were marked by an easy-going conviviality. We just all get together, and somebody would be cooking, a testament to their shared values of hospitality and simple enjoyment. There'd be a fire going, casting its warm glow against the night sky, a symbol of gathering and warmth. Maybe just sitting around talking, sharing stories and laughter, epitomizing profound connection fostered by their lifestyle. In fact, Brenda and Randy fit so well together that his friends assumed that the couple had a bright future ahead of them. The early impression was overwhelmingly positive, marked by an apparent harmony that seemed destined to endure. They had a good time, a fundamental indicator of marital success. They looked like they were perfectly happy together, presenting an unblemished facade of contentment and mutual affection. But after just 6 months, a disturbingly short duration for a marriage to face such profound trials, their marital bliss, or what appeared to be such, would take a sudden and catastrophic turn. This dramatic shift marked the first act in what would turn out to be a 5-year mystery, a chilling prelude to an unfolding drama of disappearance and suspicion that would grip the entire community. On the morning of October 22nd, 2004, a date that would irrevocably mark the descent of their relationship into chaos, 40-year-old Brenda Bratschi dialed 911 from her car. Her voice, likely tinged with a blend of fear and urgency, transmitted a distress call from within her vehicle, which she was racing away from her coward, South Carolina home. The contents of her emergency report were deeply alarming. She said he had a garden tool and had tried to attack her, painting a picture of an unprovoked and violent assault by her husband, Randy. According to Brenda's panicked account, she had, through sheer force of will or desperate ingenuity, managed to fight him off with a club she kept in her car, suggesting a pre-existing defense mechanism and a terrifyingly close call. As Brenda fled the scene of what she described as a brutal domestic confrontation, sheriff's deputies were immediately dispatched to the house. The wheels of law enforcement were set into motion, speeding towards the unfolding drama. However, they were still en route, traversing the roads of Florence County, when dispatch received another 911 call. This second emergency communication originated from Brenda's husband, 54-year-old Randy Bratschi, thereby plunging the entire situation into immediate ambiguity. Faced with perplexing and deeply concerning, he said between the couple, the dispatcher, trained in crisis management, diligently tried to sort out the truth, attempting to discern the genuine victim from the potential aggressor in this escalating domestic conflict. And according to Randy's impassioned and fear-filled account, he was lucky to be alive. His version of events, presented with stark urgency, portrayed him as a beleaguered party, a man whose life had been violently threatened. The fundamental question that hung in the air, a profound challenge to both law enforcement and the unraveling narrative, was stark and unsettling. Who was telling the truth? When Brenda arrived at the Coward police station a few minutes later, her presence a dramatic continuation of her 911 call, it was immediately clear that she'd been in a violent encounter. Her physical appearance bore stark witness to the brutal nature of the altercation. She was covered with blood, a sight that naturally lent credence to her narrative of a life-threatening struggle. However, the subsequent analysis and medical examination posed a critical question that would profoundly impact the credibility of her claims. How much of the blood was Brenda's? For a supposedly brutal attack, the extent and nature of her injuries were surprisingly minor. She had a cut on her thumb, a relatively small wound, and a small laceration, another superficial injury. That was the only trauma she presented. Crucially, she had nothing else, no other marks, bruises, or significant injuries that would align with a fierce struggle for her life against a man wielding a garden tool with intent to kill. When the investigators, seasoned professionals accustomed to parsing truth from deception, asked her why Randy might try to kill her, the purported motive for such extreme violence, Brenda had little to say. Her response was startling in its brevity and vagueness. She said, "I don't know." Her subsequent elaboration provided no further clarity, merely an unsettling non sequitur. "We were going to the bank, turned around, went back home, and the next thing I knew, he was trying to kill me." This disjointed narrative, lacking logical flow and definitive causation, immediately raised a multitude of red flags for the discerning minds of the investigators. But if that was how it happened, if Randy had indeed been the initial aggressor and Brenda the valiant defender, then when sheriff's deputies arrived at the couple's trailer, the scene painted a disturbingly contradictory picture. It appeared that Randy's plan, if his alleged intent was indeed to kill, had backfired horribly, inflicting upon him a brutal and near-fatal comeuppance. Randy's injuries were, in stark contrast to Brenda's minor wounds, pretty massive. He presented with severe facial lacerations, indicative of substantial trauma to a highly vulnerable area of the body. Beyond this, he sustained significant head trauma, a deeply concerning injury that suggested a powerful and sustained assault. Specifically, his left orbital socket was fractured severely, a catastrophic blow to the bone structure around the eye, threatening not only his vision but potentially his very life. When he was subsequently transported to a hospital in nearby Lake City, a hub of advanced medical care, the attending doctors delivered a chilling prognosis. He had been lucky. Their professional assessment underscored the peril of his condition, emphasizing that a little bit this way or that way, a minute shift in the angle or force of the blow, that he would have been dead. The unambiguous medical conclusion was that he had been beaten to within an inch of his life, a chilling confirmation of the sheer brutality inflicted upon him. In his formal statement, provided under duress of his severe injuries but with remarkable clarity, Randy recounted to the investigators his version of events, which sharply diverged from Brenda's claims. He stated that the whole thing had started early on the morning of the altercation, specifically when he'd stopped off to run a few errands on his way home from working the graveyard shift at the paper mill. This detail anchored his narrative to a tangible timeline. His first stop had been practical and mundane. He had gone to the drugstore to pick up a prescription, a routine act of self-care. It was there that the first disquieting sign emerged. His debit card was denied, a sudden and perplexing inability to access his own funds. Alarmed by this unexpected financial blockade, Randy promptly checked with his credit union, the financial institution responsible for his accounts, seeking an explanation. What he discovered sent a shockwave of realization and anger through him. Not only was his checking account empty, drained of all its funds, there was also a shocking discrepancy in the couple's savings account, too. The discrepancy was substantial, verging on the incomprehensible, given his diligent work and prudent saving habits. He thought he might have had, 20, 30 grand or something like that in there, a significant sum representing years of labor and foresight. Instead, he found a mere fraction of that amount, and he didn't have a whole lot in there. There's less than 1,000. This stark revelation about his depleted life savings was a profound betrayal, inciting in him a righteous fury. Randy said he'd been furious about the missing money, an emotional response entirely commensurate with the gravity of the financial deception. Upon returning home, he confronted Brenda with the intent of immediately resolving the situation. He went home and said, "I need you to go to the credit union with me." His purpose clear: to seek answers and restitution directly from the source. He wanted to take Brenda to straighten that out and see what she knew about it, because she would be the only other person that had access to his account, legally establishing her as the prime suspect in the unauthorized withdrawals. But as they were driving to the credit union, an ostensible journey towards transparency and resolution, Brenda starts complaining of some stomach pain, an abrupt and seemingly convenient physical ailment. She says she needs to go home right away, insisting on an immediate return. This unexpected request, coming at such a critical juncture, seemed designed to avert the imminent confrontation at the bank. Compliantly, or perhaps out of concern for her sudden distress, they turn the car around and go back home, thereby postponing the much-needed financial reckoning. Once back at the trailer, the location that would later become so central to the mystery, Randy said he'd gotten out of the car and leaned up against the fender, patiently waiting for Brenda to join him, his guard perhaps slightly lowered by the preceding events. It was at this vulnerable moment, according to his harrowing account, that she attacked. Randy brought you down with an unanticipated blow. According to Randy, Brenda had slipped out of the back door of the trailer, an act of stealth and calculated deception, and snuck up on him from behind, ensuring a surprise attack. He was then hit on the head, a concussive blow that instantly felled him, causing him to go down on his knees. The impact was severe, delivered with crushing force, and he said it almost knocked him out, indicating the blow's incapacitating effect and life-threatening potential. Randy claimed that Brenda had delivered this devastating blow with the small wooden club he kept in his vehicle, a tool known colloquially as a tire thumper. This instrument, prosaic in its original design, took on a sinister utility in Brenda's hands. A tire thumper is something they're used by truck drivers, just popping the tires. Their primary purpose is practical. They can tell by the sound, if that tire is underinflated or what, serving as a simple diagnostic tool. However, its solid construction and convenient size made it inherently dangerous. It also makes a handy weapon, a chilling observation. It almost looks like a miniature Louisville Southern baseball bat, underscoring its potential for inflicting severe blunt force trauma. Randy, a man with previous experience in physical confrontations from his police career, was profoundly shaken by the impact of the blow. He'd been in fights before and never been hit like that by a grown man, a testament to the unexpected ferocity and power of Brenda's assault. Stunned by the initial blow, his senses reeling, Randy said all he could do was stagger to his feet and desperately try to escape from Brenda's vicious attempt to further injure him. She was swinging wildly, he recounted, describing a relentless and uncontrolled flurry of blows aimed at him. He was just taking blows from all different directions, illustrating the sustained and merciless nature of the attack. His primary objective was to find refuge, to create distance from his assailant. And as he got near the trailer, his battered body propelled by sheer survival instinct, he reached a vital point of escape, getting close enough to the tool shed or the garden shed that they had on the property. Beside the structure, a mundane implement offered a potential lifeline, and there was a hoe sitting beside it. In a desperate act of self-preservation, he was able to grab the hoe. Randy emphatically stated that grabbing the garden tool had saved his life. This rudimentary implement, designed for cultivating the earth, became his shield and his defensive weapon against Brenda's continued assault. He was able to keep her back with the hoe, preventing her from closing the distance and inflicting further grievous harm. Armed with this improvised defense, he managed to create enough space to retreat to safety. And then he managed to get inside and get away from her, securing himself within the perceived sanctuary of the trailer. This was Randy's deeply disturbing account, a narrative of betrayal, violence, and a desperate fight for survival, one that stood in stark opposition to Brenda's more nebulous claims. Randy's story was drastically different from his wife's, presenting an almost complete inversion of victim and aggressor. However, when the investigators meticulously checked Randy's bank records, an objective and undeniable source of truth, they found compelling corroboration for his version of events. The couple's accounts, both checking and savings, had indeed been drained by a long series of cash withdrawals, transactions that unequivocally supported Randy's allegations of financial misconduct. These were not inconsequential sums. We're not talking $25, $50, $75, amounts that might suggest minor expenditures or casual cash needs. Instead, the pattern revealed a rapid and systematic depletion of funds. We're talking $300 today for $125 tomorrow, $300 the next day. This distinct pattern of large, frequent cash withdrawals perfectly aligned with the type of financial dissipation Randy had reported. Everything was consistent with what Randy was telling us, providing powerful evidentiary weight to his otherwise sensational account. Further investigative efforts involved interviewing several of the couple's friends, individuals who had a deeper insight into their shared lives and individual habits. These friends revealed where the money was likely going, shedding light on Brenda's secretive activities. It came to find out she had an addiction to video poker, a prevalent form of gambling at the time. At that specific period in South Carolina, video poker was legal and was openly available in every gas station and convenience store, rendering it a highly accessible and therefore potentially dangerous form of entertainment for those susceptible to its allure. That certainly would be an easy way to spend a lot of money quickly. A stark explanation for the swift and systematic depletion of Randy's life savings. But did this compelling evidence of financial impropriety definitively mean Randy was telling the truth about the assault? Or was it still possible that he'd attacked Brenda in a rage about the missing money, and that her actions were defensive as she initially claimed? The investigators, keen on discerning the nuances of the situation, didn't think so. Basing their assessment on a critical piece of evidence, his initial 911 call, in the raw, unfiltered audio of his distress, captured in the immediate aftermath of the alleged assault, you can clearly hear the fear in his voice. This visceral auditory evidence of genuine terror directly contradicted any notion that he was the aggressor or had merely been in a rage. In sum, her story just didn't hold up under scrutiny, unraveling in the face of both medical evidence and objective financial records. So at the end of the day, faced with overwhelming evidence pointing to Randy as the victim and Brenda as the assailant, the Florence County Sheriff's Department took Brenda into custody. Brenda turns herself in, fulfilling the legal requirement to answer to the accusations. She was formally charged with assault and battery with intent to kill, the severe felony accusation reflecting the gravity of the injuries Randy had sustained and the calculated nature of the attack as perceived by the authorities. Brenda spent the next few days in jail, a stark and isolating experience that contrasted sharply with her accustomed outdoor freedom. It was a family member that posted her bond and got her out, securing her temporary release through financial surety. Notably, Randy certainly didn't pay it. His relationship with Brenda had clearly devolved past any semblance of spousal support or concern. In fact, his actions were quite the opposite. He'd gone to the courthouse and gotten an order of protection against her, a restraining order legally prohibiting Brenda from approaching or contacting him. This protective order, a judicial decree, was a direct consequence of the fear Randy harbored, stating unequivocally that Brenda couldn't be around him should she be found guilty of the serious assault charges. The consequences would be dire and prolonged. If she was convicted of the assault charges, chances were she wouldn't be around him for a long time. A bleak prediction given the severity of the charge. Assault and battery with intent to kill carried at the time up to 20 years in prison, a sentence that could effectively consume a significant portion of a person's adult life. Once out of jail, Brenda had no choice but to relocate. She moved in with family, seeking refuge and support during this profoundly tumultuous period. Specifically, she went to stay with her sister and her brother-in-law, who had a large farm there in Coward, providing a familiar rural setting and the solace of family ties. Meanwhile, Randy, still recovering from his brutal injuries, continued to live in the couple's trailer, striving to rebuild his life in the aftermath of the assault. More significantly, he started taking active steps to end his brief but turbulent marriage to Brenda. He had contacted an attorney, and that he was going to go forward with the divorce, signaling his firm resolve to sever all ties and seek a legal separation. For Randy, it appeared life was indeed moving on, promising a future free from the shadow of domestic violence. And to all appearances, life was good, a fragile optimism emerging from the preceding chaos. But how far would he go? This question, imbued with unsettling prescience, would soon take on a terrifying new meaning. On November 27th, a mere month after the harrowing assault that had left Randy clinging to life, the chief investigator on the case received another phone call. This call, however, was not from Randy himself, nor from the prosecution or his attorney. Instead, it came from an unexpected source. I got a call from Randy's best friend. The friend's tone was one of palpable concern, delivering news that immediately plunged the investigators back into a state of heightened alert. He said he was concerned about Randy because they couldn't find him, signaling an inexplicable and worrying absence. Initial attempts to contact Randy directly were met with silence. I went twice to knock on door and let it go, the investigator recounted, indicating a deliberate and sustained effort to make contact. The investigators couldn't reach him either. I called him a couple times, never got an answer back, underscoring the completeness of his disappearance. A visit to his residence on a Sunday yielded no answers. Went down a house on Sunday, didn't appear to be anyone home, adding to the growing sense of foreboding. Randy's unexplained absence was particularly alarming given his well-established character. He also failed to show up for work at the paper mill, a glaring red flag for a man known for his extreme dependability. He was not the kind of guy who would just blow off going to work, at least not without calling saying, "Hey, I'm sick," or something happened, confirming that his unannounced absence was entirely out of character and deeply suspicious. Given his violent encounter with Brenda just a month earlier, a trauma still raw and recent, some of his friends immediately feared the worst. Their anxieties were deeply rooted in Randy's own prior expressions of fear. "Randy, he would tell us no. She meant to kill me, and I'm scared to death," they recounted, remembering his harrowing premonition. "She's going to do it," he had apparently said, articulating a terrifying presentiment of further violence. He had seen her field dress a deer, an unsettling detail that underscored Brenda's practical and unflinching approach to physical tasks, even those involving blood and sharp implements. He knew what she was capable of, a chilling assessment of Brenda's potential for brutality. In fact, Randy had been so afraid of Brenda that his deeply held fear, paradoxically, offered his family one faint glimmer of hope about his disappearance. Maybe he just jumped on a plane and left, they reasoned, clinging to the slim possibility that his profound fear had simply driven him to abandon his life. and seek safety elsewhere, severing all ties. But this tenuous hope was quickly dashed. Then a few days after he disappeared, Randy's radio was found at Bluff's Landing, which is a boat landing where people put it in and out of the river. The presence of a personal item, deliberately left, suggested a staging, an attempt to mislead. However, despite this finding and the inherent implication of a watery fate, there was no sign of Randy. The scene itself contributed to the ominous feeling. It basically looked like somebody had driven the car there, stopped, put it in park, and walked away. A scenario that painted a picture of deliberate abandonment rather than an accidental event. The implications were deeply unsettling. By 2009, nearly 5 years had elapsed since Brenda Bratschi had been initially charged with assaulting her husband, Randy, outside their Coward, South Carolina home in October 2004. The legal system, designed for swift resolution, had found itself stalled, caught in a suspended animation by Randy's perplexing absence. Her original offense, detailed with stark clarity, was a brutal one. She attacked Randy with a wooden tire thumper that the truck drivers used to test their tires, employing an everyday tool as a vicious weapon. The gravity of her actions was reflected in the potential judicial consequences. She was looking at doing 15 or 20 years on assault and battery with intent to kill, a prospect that loomed heavily over her future. But the case had never gone to trial. Its progression abruptly halted when Randy disappeared a mere month later. It's kind of like he just fell off the face of the earth, a phrase that starkly captures the profound and unsettling nature of his vanishing. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance only amplified the mystery. His vehicle was later discovered at the PD River at the Witt's Bluff Landing, placed in a manner that subtly but distinctly hinted at a watery end. Yet, despite an exhaustive search effort, there had been no sign of Randy. Law enforcement spared no effort, understanding the desperate need for answers. We did a large-scale search with divers on the river in both directions, covering extensive aquatic territory, hoping to find any trace of him. The authorities also turned their attention to Randy's last known residence, his trailer, searching it from top to bottom with meticulous care. It was a single-wide trailer that had metal underpinning around it, a feature that might potentially conceal something. We peeled the underpinning back and looked with flashlights, scrutinizing every hidden corner, but didn't see anything. The search efforts were not limited to official channels. The entire community, galvanized by concern and curiosity, helped search the rest of Randy's 22 acres, an expansive and challenging area to meticulously comb through. There was towns that'd be over 100 people, a testament to the collective effort and concern, with volunteers dedicating their time and energy to the grim task. The sheriff's office helped organize these people to go inch by inch over acres of property, ensuring a systematic and thorough examination of the entire expanse. The investigators, seeking every possible technological advantage, even brought in specialized equipment, deploying cadaver dogs, animals expertly trained to detect the scent of human remains, and ground-penetrating radar, a sophisticated device used to detect anomalies beneath the Earth's surface. Yet, even with all this advanced methodology and human dedication, we didn't find any evidence of any human remains. By the end of 2005, after a year of fruitless searches, marked by agonizing disappointment and unanswered prayers, the case had grown cold, a chilling reality in law enforcement parlance. There was a distinct possibility that Randy was never going to be found, a disheartening prospect for all involved. Naturally, in the wake of such a baffling and complete disappearance, nearly everyone in the community assumed that Brenda was behind her estranged husband's vanishing. The prior violent altercation, which had landed Brenda in legal jeopardy, served as a potent, immediate catalyst for such suspicions. From the start, there was strong suspicion that Brenda had murdered Randy, a perception fueled by the context of their acrimonious relationship and Randy's last reported encounter. Consequently, Brenda and her son became persons of interest, Naturally, we asked Brenda and her son to come in and talk to us about when was the last time they saw Randy, what was he doing, who he was with. Typical investigative protocols initiated to gather information and establish a timeline. But neither Brenda nor her son claimed to know anything substantial about Randy's disappearance. Their responses were, in essence, evasive or uninformative. In fact, Brenda's son had what appeared to be a credible alibi. He had been camping on the river with friends when Randy went missing, placing him away from the scene. Brenda's recounted narrative from that period also leaned on her son's supposed role in the initial discovery of Randy's absence. Her story to me then was that her son was the one that called her and told her, "Mama, I don't know where Randy is. He was supposed to let me borrow the boat." This suggested a casual and unconnected revelation rather than an involved awareness. Still, the overarching fact that Brenda had been facing prosecution for her previous brutal assault on Randy made her an irrefutable prime suspect in his disappearance. The motivation was clear and compelling. 20 years in prison could be plenty of motive for anyone to try to get rid of the main witness in the case. With Randy, the sole eyewitness to Brenda's alleged intent to kill, out of the picture, the prosecution's ability to move forward with the assault charge was crippled. Because Randy wasn't there to testify, then we couldn't take that case to trial. A stark demonstration of how his disappearance benefited Brenda directly. But while suspecting Brenda of murder was one thing, an intuitive and widely held belief based on circumstantial evidence and past actions, prosecuting her for it was an entirely different and significantly more complex challenge. The judicial system demanded concrete evidence, a body, and a clear causal link to a perpetrator. The prosecutor, understandably, wanted to find Randy before they prosecuted, understanding that a murder charge without a confirmed victim or a body would be exceptionally difficult to secure. Finding the answers, finding him, being able to link Brenda to the crime, these were the intractable obstacles that tormented investigators. I think that was hugely frustrating to the sheriff's office, whose diligent work was continually stonewalled by the absence of definitive proof. And so, by 2009, as years stretched into a grim 5-year period of unresolved mystery, it looked as if Brenda hadn't just gotten away with assault. To the dismay of many within the community and the frustration of law enforcement, it looked as if she'd gotten away with murder, too. This perception of unpunished criminality grated on the public's sense of justice. Despite the fact that most folks around Coward suspected she'd killed Randy, a strong current of belief that flowed through the local rumor mill, Brenda remained physically present in the area, a constant, unsettling reminder of the unresolved case. She did not retreat into obscurity. Brenda continued to work at the family farm, maintaining her established routines and contributing to her family's livelihood. Furthermore, she was working at a bar, presumably another juke joint, indicating a continuation of her social and economic habits. And, interestingly, there was a body shop too, suggesting she may have picked up additional manual labor consistent with her established work ethic. However, one specific decision she made after Randy's disappearance stood out, a curious choice that perplexed observers and subtly fueled suspicions. One thing she never did, though, was move back into the trailer where she lived with Randy. This absence from a marital home was striking. There would have been nothing preventing her from going back to the marital home and moving in, legally or practically. The property was hers to inhabit, as Randy was simply missing. And her decision to stay away surprised some people, as it seemed economically illogical. The house was paid for, a significant asset, especially for someone who had experienced financial struggles. Yet, despite the obvious financial advantage of inhabiting a debt-free home, she just chose to never go back and let it go to tax sale, a process where unpaid property taxes lead to the forfeiture and sale of the land. This unusual detachment from a valuable asset, coupled with her known financial issues and the surrounding mystery, became another subtle but potent piece of the larger puzzle in the minds of those watching. And then, as if destiny itself was orchestrating the unveiling of truth, July of 2009 arrived. Nearly 5 years had passed since Randy's perplexing disappearance. 5 years of whispers, unproven theories, and persistent heartache. During this interim, the trailer and the 22 acres of Randy's former property had passed through several hands. A succession of ownership changes due to the aforementioned tax sale and subsequent transactions. Eventually, the property was acquired by a new owner, a person with concrete plans for its future. This new owner wanted to build a house on the property, envisioning a fresh start and a more modern dwelling on the scenic acreage. To facilitate their ambitious plans, they hired a mobile home moving company to perform the necessary but routine task of relocating the existing structure. The instructions were clear: to move the single wide trailer off of the property and down the street, making way for the new construction. It was on July 16th, a hot summer day, as the movers diligently dragged the trailer off the site, following precise directives given. The process was physically demanding, requiring heavy machinery and careful navigation. As the trailer was pulled, a critical structural component, its tongue, a heavy metal bar used for hitching, experienced a downward shift. The tongue fell down and grabbed right up underneath the edge of the tarp that Randy was wrapped in, a cruel twist of fate, or perhaps an inescapable call of justice. The precise alignment of the trailer tongue with the buried, concealed tarp proved to be the pivotal, macabre trigger that finally brought the long-buried truth to light. At least the workers, confronted with the gruesome sight, immediately suspected that the skeletal remains they had uncovered were Randy's. Given the history and what had happened on that property, the notorious disappearance that had haunted the town for half a decade, the local lore and the circumstances of the unearthing left little room for doubt. And, understanding the gravity of their discovery, they immediately contacted the Florence County Sheriff's Office, setting into motion the final act of this chilling drama. Upon receiving the news, the initial reaction from the investigators, worn down by years of fruitless searching and dashed hopes, was almost disbelieving. "I thought they were playing a joke on me," one investigator admitted, underscoring the deep skepticism that had settled in over the years. It had been so many years, such a protracted period of time, and it had been something that, I was beginning to wonder, are we ever going to find him? The weight of this long unanswered question had become almost a burden. But when deputies drove out to the trailer, dispatched to verify the astonishing claim, they quickly confirmed that the movers had unearthed the remains of an adult male. The scene was clear, gruesome, and irrefutable. It was a shallow grave, excavated with minimal effort, merely a couple feet deep, explaining in part why previous searches had missed it. However, the question lingered, a puzzling enigma for law enforcement professionals. Why haven't the body been found during the extensive searches of the property 5 years earlier? That is something I cannot explain, one investigator honestly confessed, acknowledging the inexplicable gap in their otherwise thorough initial efforts. "I personally looked under the house myself on one of the searches that we did looking for Randy," he confirmed, emphasizing the meticulousness of the initial sweep. The prevailing theory, attempting to reconcile this baffling oversight, centered on the unique combination of the burial site and the preserving agents involved. "I think he was buried far enough. I guess with the tarp and the soil on top of him was enough to keep the odor in the ground." A chilling hypothesis that pointed to a calculated concealment that had defied the keen senses of cadaver dogs and the rigorous scrutiny of human investigators. The tarp, serving as an impermeable barrier along with the earth compacted above it, created a perfect, albeit accidental, seal that masked the telltale scent of decomposition from the outside world for 5 agonizing years. For Randy's family, the long-awaited discovery, however grim, offered a powerful and profound emotional shift. It provided a tangible point of resolution, ending the torturous limbo of uncertainty. More significantly, it offered a long-awaited shot at justice, a renewed hope that the truth would finally emerge and accountability would be served. I knew in my heart that she had killed him, Randy's sister declared, expressing a long-held conviction that had sustained her through years of doubt and despair. And I was going to make sure that she paid for this, a powerful and unwavering vow to pursue retribution through the legal system. But first, before any charges could be laid, the authorities would have to prove the body was Randy's, a critical step in the forensic identification process. This, however, was no easy task. The extensive passage of time and the corrosive work of nature had profoundly altered the remains. There was such a level of decomposition that it made even identifying the remains almost an impossible task. The visible evidence was stark. All that was left was essentially a skeleton, bone without flesh, presenting a significant challenge for conventional identification methods. It wasn't until almost 5 months later that the forensic experts, through painstaking work and sophisticated techniques, were finally able to confirm that the remains were indeed Randy's, a crucial breakthrough after months of agonizing waiting. In a bizarre and profoundly ironic twist, the original assault with a tire thumper, the very act that had initially placed Brenda in legal jeopardy and indirectly led to Randy's disappearance, turned out to be the unexpected key to making the identification. The detailed medical records generated from that earlier violent encounter proved invaluable. They took the CAT scans and MRIs that the doctors had done, the precise imaging from Randy's recovery, and they compared those with the skeletal remains, focusing on areas of trauma. Through this meticulous forensic comparison of the unique patterns of fracture and healing in his orbital socket, and other cranial injuries, they were able to identify them that way, definitively confirming Randy's identity. The very violence intended to silence him forever in a grim turn of events became the indelible marker that finally spoke his name from the grave. Once the body was identified, thereby transitioning Randy from a missing person to a confirmed homicide victim, the investigators were able to obtain the necessary legal authorization. They secured a warrant for Brenda's arrest on murder charges. A logical progression, given the circumstances. The rationale was deeply rooted in the prior events. Nobody would have caused to do it, other than the person that attempted to kill him. A month prior, this established history of violence and demonstrated murderous intent served as a powerful, circumstantial link. The investigators, having also developed suspicions about Brenda's son's potential involvement, also got the judge to swear out a warrant for Brenda's 23-year-old son. While not immediately linking him to the physical act of murder, they believed he possessed crucial information. Investigators had already always thought that Brenda's son had not necessarily helped her carry out the murder, but might have known something about it, a perception fueled by inconsistencies in his previous statements. There were major inconsistencies that he told us in his statements, pointing to a potential cover-up or deliberate obfuscation. Brenda was the first to be picked up, her arrest occurring on the morning of December 7th, 2009. She was taken into the sheriff's office, a familiar yet now far more ominous setting, where she was meticulously sat down in an interrogation room. The investigators, seeking to gather more information and potentially a confession, asked if she'd take a polygraph, a lie detector test, and, perhaps surprisingly, she said she would. Once she'd been hooked up to the machine, its sensors meticulously recording physiological responses, the investigators started asking questions. Throughout the initial phase, she was claiming complete innocence, steadfastly denying any involvement with Randy's disappearance, and vehemently disclaiming any role in his murder. But by the time the test was over, Brenda's confidence had visibly eroded. She sounded more than a little unsure of her performance, suggesting she recognized the perceived failure of the examination. Her attempt to discredit the polygraph results, even before they were officially presented, offered a strategic opening for the investigators. And then, after making that attempt to discredit the results, they used that as a jumping-off point to try to elicit a confession, pressing her on the perceived deceptions detected by the machine. Brenda, however, proved resilient in this controlled environment, refusing to take the bait of direct accusation and remaining silent on the murder itself. But the investigators had another, more potent card to play, a strategic leverage that proved deeply unsettling for Brenda, her 23-year-old son, who was also facing potential charges. The threat of her son being formally charged with all the dire consequences that entailed appeared to work. Under this immense psychological pressure, Brenda asked for a break and, more specifically, a chance to talk to investigator Phil Hanna, instead, recognizing in him a local connection and perhaps a perceived trustworthiness. Investigator Hanna possessed a unique advantage in this rural community. "I was born and raised in the area," he explained, articulating a profound sense of rootedness and familiarity. "People knew me. I was trusted in that area, giving him an innate rapport that other, more removed officers might lack." This established trust was precisely why Brenda specifically requested him. She wanted to smoke a cigarette, a common stress relief mechanism during intense interrogations. And it was outside, by herself with Hanna, that the pivotal moment occurred. She and I walked outside by ourselves in the front of the Florence County Sheriff's Office. A seemingly innocuous private moment outside the confines of the interrogation room. Phil, however, was a professional operating within protocol. He had a voice recorder in his pocket, so that he would record anything that he and Brenda talked about, covertly documenting the conversation. Brenda didn't know about the recorder, providing her with a false sense of unrecorded privacy. But she knew that she was talking to a cop, a fundamental understanding of her legal predicament. And, remarkably, that didn't stop her. Why she smoked her cigarette is when she told me everything had happened, finally breaking her 5-year silence. Brenda's confession began with a deliberate effort to shield her son, claiming his innocence as her first priority. She said she knew her son was involved because she had killed Randy, taking full responsibility and explicitly exonerating him. She finally confessed, a profound and long-awaited moment of truth for the investigators. Investigator Hanna felt a palpable shift in her demeanor during this candid moment. "I felt like she was glad to be able to finally tell somebody, recognizing the immense psychological burden that a 5-year secret of such magnitude could impose." And once Brenda had finished her cigarette, a ritualistic end to her private unveiling, she went back inside, sat down in front of camera, and, now within the recorded confines of the interrogation room, told the investigators just how Randy died, her version of it at least, providing a narrative designed to frame her actions in the most favorable light. "Tell me again what you told me about it," the investigators prompted, ensuring a clear and recorded account of her detailed narrative. According to Brenda's carefully constructed confession, delivered with a calm, albeit self-serving, demeanor, it started with a chance encounter on November 26, 2004, a month after her initial arrest for assaulting Randy. The details were crucial to her defense. "I had him on the road that morning," she began, implying an accidental meeting. "And he dragged me down," she claimed, painting Randy as the aggressor who forced a confrontation. "I stopped, and he wanted to talk, presenting herself as compliant but hesitant. He asked if I'd drive back up to the house with him. A seemingly innocuous request that would lead to tragedy. Brenda said she'd agreed, but her internal monologue indicated a deep reluctance to re-enter the volatile space of the trailer. With her estranged husband, she explained that she felt like he was going to shoot her, framing her subsequent actions as preemptive self-defense against a perceived imminent threat. He told her that he was going to take care of her once and for all, a chilling threat that she cited as direct provocation. According to her narrative, a violent struggle ensued. She struggled with him face to face, asserting a direct, mutual engagement rather than a sneak attack. The climax of the struggle, according to her, came when the gun went off. Brenda said that when she realized Randy was dead, a profound and irreversible tragedy unfolding before her eyes, she had panicked. Her subsequent actions, she argued, were born of this fear and desperation. She said that the sheriff's office didn't believe her during the assault case, expressing profound distrust in the system based on her prior arrest, and that there was no way that we were going to believe that things happened the way that it actually did, asserting her belief that her self-defense plea would be dismissed. Thus, she made a calculated decision to conceal the crime. Then, according to what Brenda told the investigators, she'd left Randy's car at the boat landing, a deliberate act to mislead authorities. Brenda's plan was to stage it as just suicide. He jumped in the river and drowned, creating a plausible, albeit false, narrative for his disappearance. And while she was there, she threw the gun into the river, disposing of the crucial piece of evidence that had ended Randy's life. By the time she was done, the investigators, having meticulously documented every detail of her confession, figured they had almost everything they needed to prosecute. She doesn't admit that she killed him, the investigator noted, highlighting Brenda's refusal to use that specific term, but she admits to getting rid of his body, a critical admission of felony misconduct regardless of the murder charge. Even if Brenda insisted it wasn't murder, carefully framing her actions as unintended, it was still her contention that it was self-defense. Randy attacked her, she maintained, asserting her victimhood. She was just defending herself, a legal defense she hoped would absolve her. On April 16, 2012, over 2 years after her confession, and 5 years after Randy's remains were found, Brenda Bratschi finally went on trial for murder at the Florence County Courthouse in Florence, South Carolina. The 48-year-old stood accused of the heinous murder of her husband, Randy, an act that had ended his life back in 2004. The case, protracted by Randy's disappearance, had been one of the most talked-about crimes in the quiet South Carolina Low Country. Randy disappeared in 2004, setting off a chain of events that culminated in this dramatic courtroom confrontation. Given the history, Brenda was a very logical suspect, particularly considering the events just 4 weeks before she tried to kill him, a prior violent incident that painted a clear picture of her potential for aggression. That assault in October of 2004, which had landed Randy in the hospital with life-threatening injuries, had initially resulted in Brenda's arrest. Brenda was arrested for assault battery with intent to kill, a serious felony. But, as previously established, that case had been put on hold when Randy mysteriously disappeared a month later, leaving justice in limbo. I was thoroughly convinced that she had done something to Randy, Randy's sister expressed, articulating a long-held conviction that persisted through years of uncertainty. Although it wasn't until 2009, after Randy's skeletal remains had been found underneath the couple's trailer, that she had been officially charged with murder, giving form to the long-held suspicions. The gruesome details of the discovery were recounted, forming a vivid and disturbing backdrop to the trial. The property was sold, so they were removing Randy's old trailer. When they dropped the trailer and pulled it, the tongue actually caught a piece of the blue tarp that Randy was wrapped up in and pulled him up out of the sand and the dirt, a chillingly precise account of the unearthing. Following her arrest for murder, Brenda had, as the investigators knew, confessed to killing Randy, providing the most direct evidence of her involvement, although Brenda maintained her claim that she had acted in self-defense. When he pulled his gun at me and I grabbed his arm and we got to fighting over the gun and it went off, she had recounted, framing the shooting as an accidental consequence of a struggle for survival. When she walked into the courtroom on the morning of April 16th, she appeared outwardly confident about her chances of acquittal. She had made the comments that, y'all are only going to see me for a couple more days because I'm going home, exhibiting a hubris born of misplaced assurance. Brenda's perceived cockiness, however, had nothing to do with the intrinsic strength of her claims of self-defense, which were riddled with inconsistencies and questions of credibility. Instead, It had to do with a crucial ruling the judge made before the trial began. A pre-trial decision that significantly altered the prosecution's strategy. The court was not going to allow her confession to be used as evidence against her, a monumental blow to the state's case. The judge felt, but maybe Brenda Bratschi was somehow coerced because her son was also arrested, introducing a legal technicality regarding the conditions of her confession. They got empty's going to arrest her son. They're in charge. They're in charge of the murder. The argument was that the investigator's threat to charge her son likely put undue influence and, too, much pressure on her, thereby render her confession inadmissible under constitutional protections against coerced statements. The result of this judicial ruling was a huge hole in the prosecution's case, severely limiting the evidence they could present to the jury. We couldn't go into anything regarding the actual murder and how that happened. The prosecutor conceded, lamenting the forced omission of Brenda's own detailed account. What the prosecution did have, though, as a powerful alternative, was what happened a month before Randy disappeared, the previously established assault. Normally in court, you can't talk about what a defendant's done in their past or their prior bad acts or crimes. Adherence to legal principles that prevent character assassination. However, the court made an exception for us in this case, recognizing the unique and critical relevance of the previous assault to the murder charge. So, with the judge's blessing to introduce the prior act, the prosecutor opened his case by meticulously walking the jury through the chain of events that had begun when Randy discovered the money missing from their bank accounts. This foundational element, the financial betrayal, served as a powerful motive. Money that Brenda had lost playing video poker, an addiction that served as a clear, understandable impetus for her desperate actions. Brenda was like a trapped animal, the prosecutor asserted, painting a psychological portrait of a cornered individual driven by instinct. She knew she was going to be in trouble. He continued, articulating her perceived predicament. Therefore, to keep Randy from going to the authorities about the missing money, she lashed out and attacked Randy and tried to kill him, linking the financial crime to the violent act. And when she failed, when her initial attempt at murder proved unsuccessful, she had this serious felony that was pending against her, a looming specter of 20 years in prison. But according to prosecution, there was a nefarious way out, a drastic solution to her legal and personal dilemma. Get rid of Randy, the prosecutor contended, identifying the ultimate, ruthless motivation for his disappearance. If she removed the victim from the equation, she didn't have to worry about being prosecuted because he was the only eyewitness other than her. His removal would effectively dismantle the state's case against her for the assault. So, according to the prosecution theory, on November 26, she came back and finally finished the job, asserting a clear and malicious intent to complete the murderous task. He leaves the paper mill at 7 o'clock in the morning, gets home, and as he walked in the door, Brenda was waiting on him. That is the theory that she ambushed him, a chilling depiction of premeditated murder, portraying Brenda not as a victim, but as a cunning and ruthless killer. Friends of Randy's also took the stand, their testimonies lending emotional weight and corroborating details to the prosecution's narrative. They vividly described how afraid he'd been after the initial assault, particularly when Brenda was released on bail. He was scared to death of her, one friend attested, conveying Randy's palpable terror. He was frightened, so frightened that there was a restraining order for her, legally prohibiting her presence. She could not be nowhere near that property. A judicial decree that Brenda clearly violated if the ambush theory was correct. However, while they had plenty of evidence that connected Brenda to the assault, the state, hobbled by the inadmissible confession, had nothing to really tie Brenda to the murder directly. No eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, no immediate forensic connection. Nothing, that is, except for Randy's vehicle, which served as a crucial piece of circumstantial evidence. After Randy disappeared, his distinctive SUV was found abandoned. Someone had abandoned his SUV at a boat landing on the PD River, specifically placed as if to make it look like he drowned, thereby fabricating a suicide or accidental drowning scenario. The night that it was left there, an unexpected and crucial encounter occurred. There was a person that approached a couple of houses adjacent to the landing and asked to use the telephone. A resident from one of those homes, whose property overlooked the landing, took the stand, becoming a critical eyewitness. He described the person who knocked on his door that night as a woman dressed in hunting. Camouflage, a description that immediately called Brenda to mind. He said, "Oh, this woman. She had just scared, acted disoriented, her behavior suggesting a state of agitation or panic." According to his testimony, the woman claimed she'd had car trouble and he'd offered to drive her into Coward, an act of neighborly assistance. He gave her a ride to Mac, but then about a block of where Randy's trailer stood, he dropped her off, unwittingly completing a segment of a killer's escape route. And when the prosecutor, with a dramatic pause, asked if the person that knocked on his door was in the courtroom, the witness, after scanning the faces, answered with an unequivocal yes. And then he pointed at Brenda, an electrifying moment of direct identification that sent a ripple through the courtroom. It was strong, circumstantial evidence because this happened the night after Randy was missing, creating a powerful link between Brenda, Randy's vehicle, and the fabricated scene. The compelling nature of this testimony raised profound question for the jury to consider. Would connecting Brenda to Randy's car via the eyewitness identification be enough to convict her of murder, despite the absence of a direct confession or weapon? This was the pivotal challenge for the prosecution. When it was the defense's turn to present their case, Brenda's attorney opened by calling a surprising witness, her son, who was now 25 years old. "We had no intention of calling her son to the stand," the prosecutor later remarked, acknowledging their surprise when the defense called him. Back in 2009, after Randy's body had been found, Brenda's then 23-year-old son had been arrested along with his mother, caught in the dragnet of suspicion. But contrary to what the investigators had told Brenda in the interrogation room, the powerful leverage used to induce her confession, he'd never been formally charged with his stepfather's murder. Brenda's son actually possessed a rock-solid alibi for the time that Randy had actually disappeared. He was actually camping with some friends of his, a clear and independently verifiable account that placed him away from the crime scene. However, despite the ironclad alibi for the murder, he had been arrested on minor charges, indicating a perceived complicity or withholding of information by law enforcement. Those are discrepancies in his statement he gave, the prosecutor explained, detailing the justification for his arrest. "We charged the son with misprison of a felony, a common law offense that pertains to concealing a felony, which is a common law offense and doesn't carry near the repercussions that a murder charge would. Carry, it implies knowledge of a felony and a failure to report it, not direct participation. Nevertheless, facing those charges had a serious, indeed silencing, impact on his testimony. Every question he was asked, he claimed the Fifth Amendment, invoking his constitutional right against self-incrimination. This refusal to testify, the prosecutors shrewdly observed, was precisely why the defense had put Brenda's son on the stand in the first place, to strategically introduce ambiguity. They were trying to take the blame off of Brenda, the prosecutor summarized, to cast some shadow of doubt on the killer's identity, redirecting suspicion to a plausible alternative in the jury's mind. But when the case finally went to the jury for deliberation, allowing them to weigh the presented evidence and render a verdict, it quickly became clear that the defense, despite their initial confidence and the pre-trial ruling regarding Brenda's confession, was having second thoughts about their chances for an acquittal. While the deliberations were ongoing, indicating a lack of immediate certainty for either side, the defense unexpectedly approached the prosecutors with the offer of a last-minute deal. She would plead guilty for 25 years, a substantial concession designed to avoid the potentially more severe penalty of a life sentence. following a guilty verdict. On April 19, 2012, a date that would bring closure to a long and agonizing journey for justice. 48-year-old Brenda Bratschi sat once again in a Florence, South Carolina courtroom. She was awaiting the verdict in her murder trial, the culmination of years of investigation and legal battle. Brenda acted as if there was not a cure in her mind, exhibiting a profound, almost unsettling detachment, as if the proceedings had little bearing on her personal fate. She was accused of killing her estranged husband, Randy, in 2004, an act of violence that had ripple effects throughout their small community. Randy's sister, a steadfast presence throughout the ordeal, felt an unwavering conviction regarding the heinousness of the crime. It was such a heinous crime, she believed, one that demanded ultimate retribution. It was so violent, so vile that a person like that doesn't need to be in society, expressing her profound belief that Brenda was a danger to the public. Randy's sister was determined to see to it, too, unwavering in her quest for severe justice. She had already rejected the defense's last-minute offer to plead guilty in exchange for a 25-year sentence, declining the plea deal. She had faith in the justice system, placing her trust in the democratic process of a jury trial. She let the jury handle it, empowering the 12 individuals to determine the fate of her brother's killer. And so, the family's 8-year quest for justice, a prolonged period of grief, hope, and unwavering determination, all came down to the moment when the verdict was read. The courtroom hushed, the tension palpable, as the clerk pronounced the jury's decision. Brenda was found guilty of murder. The word guilty reverberated through the silent room, confirming the darkest suspicions that had long swirled around her. Brenda appeared visibly crushed by the verdict, her previously detached demeanor crumbling in the face of absolute reality. The minute they said guilty, she put her face down and looked straight down and didn't look back up, a stark physical manifestation of her shattered confidence and the crushing weight of her conviction. Worse was coming, though, a second, equally devastating blow. The judge, having received the verdict, prepared to hand down his sentence, a formal pronouncement that would seal Brenda's fate. Randy's sister got her wish, a somber and poignant victory in the name of her deceased brother. The judge told her that she will spend the rest of her natural life in prison, delivering the maximum penalty allowed by law. She was given life without the possibility of parole, ensuring that Brenda would never again walk free, her freedom irrevocably forfeited by her actions. And it was only after he'd passed sentence, after the finality of the judicial outcome had been irrevocably established, that the judge revealed the crucial piece of evidence he'd previously ruled inadmissible to the court. That, yes, she confessed, he confirmed, finally making public the deeply incriminating truth of Brenda's own words. She admitted that she did it, dispelling any lingering doubts about her culpability. This revelation came as a huge shock to Brenda's family, who had remained loyal throughout the trial, operating under the assumption that her denials were genuine. They had no idea that she confessed, having been kept in the dark about this critical piece of evidence. I really felt sorry for her family, the investigator remarked, acknowledging the painful and blindsiding impact of this disclosure. Everybody was in tears about the outcome, the emotional fallout extending beyond the immediate victim and perpetrator. Her family were all gathered up and hugging one another and crying, a shared moment of grief and disillusionment at the raw truth. Among Randy's family and friends, however, there was no jubilation or boisterous rejoicing, merely a long-awaited feeling of closure, a deep and quiet sense of relief that the years of agonizing uncertainty had finally ended. After all that time, all those years, it was finally over, a quiet testament to the enduring human need for resolution. There was also a sense of relief that Brenda was indeed going to prison for a crime she very nearly got away with, acknowledging the intricate dance of fate and perseverance that brought her to justice. Katrina had never been moved, Had it not been for the eventual and unexpected move of that humble trailer, he wouldn't be found today. The seemingly random act of real estate development had, in a most unexpected and profound way, ultimately brought justice to light.